starting on verse 1. The oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw, O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear, or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. Look among the nations and see wonder and be astounded, for I am doing work in your days that you would not believe if told. Amen. The title of this sermon is, How Long Shall I Cry for Help, and You Will Not Hear Me? Brings me back to my childhood when I was about, 7, 8, 9, 12, I don't know. I was young. And I was at my grandparents' house, and my grandmother was watching me that day, and they had a ranch home with a remodeled basement. When I say remodeled, sometime in the 60s it was remodeled. And I used to go down in the basement and hang out and play with all the toys. It was kind of limited, but they had some fun stuff to play with and guns to look at and all kinds of stuff. And I was down there, and they have a little bathroom down there. So I'll spare you the details, but I went to the bathroom, and after I was done, I went to get out of the bathroom. It's a little tiny bathroom, and I could not get out of the bathroom. So what did I do? I screamed for my grandmother, Nanny, Nanny. I remember screaming, and I could not get out of the door. It just didn't open. The doorknob turned, but it didn't open. And screaming for her over and over again. I remember getting hoarse in my voice, calling out for help. Now, my grandfather contrived a contraption that when you turn on the basement light, the radio would come on. And so my grandmother wouldn't forget to turn the light off. So the radio was overpowering the sound of me screaming. And he was a staunch Democrat, but Rush Limbaugh was always on the radio. I don't know why, but it was. So Nanny couldn't hear my cries over Rush Limbaugh. Nanny, Nanny. And some time passed, and you have to understand, my grandmother wasn't a bad person, quite the contrary. Like, so much of a nice person that she had a yard sale one time, and she actually lost money because she gave everything away. So that's the kind of person we're dealing with. Because I was crying out, and because she wasn't answering, wasn't because of her character. She couldn't hear me. And eventually, she noticed I was gone for a long time, and her being a good nanny, a couple hours later, came down, checked on me, and noticed I was in the bathroom. And eventually she heard my calls, and all it was a stuck door. If I would have pulled a little bit harder, it could have got out. So I know what it's like from a human perspective to cry out, and there's no answer. And maybe you could relate to that in a human perspective. But how about when it comes to God? Do you find yourself crying out to God, and it feels like He doesn't answer at times? And really what it comes down to is, do we determine what God should do in our life? Sorry to spoil it, but we have a good tendency of telling God what He should do. And sometimes it feels like He's not answering because we want Him to become like us. And He did that in Christ, but a different way. We want Him to follow our agenda, our honey-do list. And when God doesn't do that, do we feel like He's not listening? But God is always there. He's not silent. And we're going to see this prophet, Habakkuk, probably Habakkuk, but whatever we want to call him, he is struggling with this very thing that you and me might be struggling with right now. Where is God when I cry out? And every prophet is so unique. That's why it's hard to describe all of these prophets in one way. Last week we had Nahum, who was reiterating God's plan of destruction for Nineveh. And now we have Habakkuk, who is going back and forth with God. And we see his struggle between God and him and what God is doing in the world around him. And hopefully it provides us with answers right now if you are crying out to God and you feel like He's not answering you. He's crying out there in the midst of this, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear," struggling with that. And he says, or cry to you violence. And he's saying this word Hamas, or Hamas in English. We're familiar with that word if we follow the news, right? That word means violence in Hebrew. And he's seeing violence around him. It's evil. It's destructiveness from another nation. And he's telling God this is going on. Actually, it's not another nation. It's of his own people. And he's telling God, this is going on. And I'm crying out to you, God. Here is violence. And here is a mess. And you're not saving us from that mess. And he tells God who he is. You make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? The law is paralyzed, no justice. Wicked surround the righteous. Do you feel like that in the world that you live in right now? Do you feel like there's things going on in this country that shake you up a little bit? I hope so. And I hope that you are going to the Lord with that. We are not going to criticize Habakkuk for going to God and complaining to God. That's the right thing to do. When you see the world a mess around you, is it going to help the world more by complaining? Telling everybody else who agrees with you, do you see this world? Do you see those people? Are you going before God as much as you're complaining about it? And taking it before God and God, telling God exactly what God already knows, but dealing with it before God? And do you ever struggle with God when it seems like he's not answering your prayers about the world being a mess? God, why are these things happening? I probably don't need to remind you, but let's look at some of these things. 1.12 to 1.14 million abortions a year in the United States of America. Have you ever cried out to God about this? God, let us not kill babies anymore. And God hates it, and we cry out, and where is he? 134 million gamblers. That's half of the population of the United States. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. 9% of adults identify as LGBTQ. I'm not sure it's that many. I think we're told that it's that many, but a lot of people are engaging in that, so much so that there's a month to celebrate that. Does that shake you up a little bit? Anybody excited for July to move on from that? And we're crying out to God, God, this is going on. Church attendance dropped from 42% of people in the 2000s to 30% in recent years, and I'm not so sure it's that many people on a Sunday that go to church. And isolation is increasing. Our kids are becoming more isolated. After COVID, everybody's isolated in this own little world and not connecting with other people. And you may think of a lot of other messes that are going on in this world, and you, I hope, are crying out just like Habakkuk or whatever we're going to call him. We should call him Habby. God's answer in Habakkuk 1:5 through 11. And his answer is probably not what this guy Habakkuk wants to hear when he's crying out to God of what's going on. God's answer to him is, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. So we'll get to that in a second. I want to give you a little bit of timeline that sometimes I take for granted that you may or may not know. 722 and 586 are the biggest dates, if you have to know dates from the Old Testament. 722 is when the Assyrians took the northern kingdom that we call Israel captive. And they never really fully got reestablished after that. And 586 BC is often the date attributed to the Babylonian captivity of when Babylon or Chalcedon is going to come into southern kingdom, into Judah, and sack Jerusalem and take them captive into their nation as slaves. So those are the two dates. And Habakkuk comes right in the middle of those two events. He's right in the middle, 640 BC to 615 BC, sometime in that area, and he's struggling seeing all the evil that is going on among his own people in Judah and saying, God, why don't you intervene? And God saying, I am intervening. And how is God intervening? He is going to sack Judah with the Babylonians. That's like, God, look at all of this evil that's going on in America. All those things that we just listed, all of this is going on. And God says, hey, I'm going to attack the United States with China and take care of those things. How would you feel about that? Not the solution you're looking for, is it? And that's exactly what Habakkuk is going through right now. He's telling God there's this evil. God's like, yeah, I see it. I'm being very patient, but I'm going to attack Judah with Babylon. And what is Habakkuk's response to that? Not a very good one. He's like, the Babylonians are evil men. They're evil, whose own might is their God. And that is very important as a description of who these Babylonians are. Their own might is their God. And before you totally look down on somebody for having that mentality, understand that we are all prone to this very same mentality. We give ourselves way too much credit, and we often find that we are paving our own path apart from God too frequently. The Babylonians, they did it to an extreme where they were putting their own works above God. They weren't giving God credit, and they were looking to their own might as their God. There's a word that sums this mentality up. It starts with a P and ends in E. Does anybody know that word? It's pride. That's what pride is. You worship yourself and your own might. And really goes back to the illustration that's opposite of that, Peter walking on water. He looked to his own might, and what happened to him? He began to sink. That's what it means to look to your own might. He goes back to questioning God again. Are you God not from everlasting? He's asking God, I think I'm messing up who you are, God. Are you not the God that is ever existing? Are you not the all-powerful God? Habakkuk doesn't like God's answer. Many of you don't like God's answer sometimes when you're crying out to him. And that's a real testament to what you are to do next. 113, how could you remain silent when the wicked swallows up someone more righteous than he? Who is the one who's more righteous in this statement? The more righteous one, according to him, is the people of the southern kingdom, Judah. And the one doing the swallowing up, who's destroying nations, is Babylon. And he's saying, how can you use somebody more evil to punish a less evil entity? That doesn't seem very just. Habakkuk didn't like God's answer. He compared people to fish and the Babylonians as a dragnet that worshiped their net when they carried nations off. That's exactly how they treated it, like some dumb fish that they're just taking on, that it's not even human beings. Habakkuk made his complaint to God, and then he was waiting for God to give him an answer. And it actually says that he's waiting on the watchtower. He presented his case before God, and he's ready to hear what God has to say. And before we string him up, we have to understand that it's not wrong to question God. You know what is worse than questioning God? Never going to God in prayer. You understand that there's sometimes a distance and a separation in our spiritual life because we're not praying enough. I'll be honest with you, last week it was a time where I stepped up my prayer game, and I'll tell you, there's no better place to be than being in a place where you're in prayer with God. And the first thing I do when I pray is I dump. Do you know what I mean by that? I dump out all the junk I'm struggling with, casting your cares, if you will. All the stuff that is eating away at me, I pour it out to God in words, and this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm struggling with. That's exactly what Habakkuk is doing. He's dumping out to God. All this mess is going on. God, what are you going to do about it? He's making his complaint to God, and he's sitting and he's waiting for God's response. What a beautiful picture for us. Isn't that exactly what we should do as saints of the Lord? Dump out to God, pray, make our case, and then sit and watch. When we're sitting and watching, who are we looking to for the answers? We're looking to God. And so often, we skip the step of prayer and we go to ourselves and we go to our own hands to resolve our situation, right? Am I right? I'm going to try much harder. I'm going to do much greater job. I'm going to take care of this all the more. And here's Habakkuk doing exactly what we need to do, pouring out his heart to God. And here he is. Now, some of the great saints have questioned God, and it shows that their relationship with God was in process. Do you know what I mean by that? They're learning about God through the hard circumstances that they're going through. They're learning about God where they don't quite align with God. God always gives answers, but not necessarily to the questions that they ask, right? And we see that in our own life. Psalm 13:1, here's an example. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? That sounds so dramatic. It sounds so harsh. It sounds exactly what you and I think all day long. How long will you hide your face from me? And then the conclusion of that psalm at the very end, but I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. What's he doing? He's looking back to how God always took care of him in the past. Isn't that neat? We're dealing with what's going on in the present. We're struggling with God, but then we're counseling as we pour out to God. And I believe it's the Spirit of God interacting when a person goes before God in prayer. And I believe the Spirit's interacting with the psalmist as he's pouring out to God, and he's bringing him to the place, but I have trusted in your steadfast love. It's like the island when you're in the middle of an ocean looking for rest. Psalm 10:1, why, O Lord, do you stand far away? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? And at the end of that psalm, O Lord, you hear the desire of the afflicted. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear to do justice to the fatherless and the oppressed, so that the man who is in earth may strike terror no more. And you see this change. How about this one? Oftentimes at Good Friday, we don't acknowledge the end to this psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. And some of you are at combat with God, but you never take that combat to prayer. Some of you are upset with the way things are going on in your life. Am I wrong? Some of you are upset the way certain details are going on in your life right now, and you're mad because you know God is in charge and you know God is sovereign, but you're never taking it to God in this way. This tells me that it's right to take these struggles to God. This tells me that I need to go to God. Why? Because I don't go, well, I need an adjustment. That's why. I need God to adjust me with his sovereignness and his love and his kindness and his character. In Psalm 22, we see Jesus praying this at the cross. And I believe ultimately Jesus knows the end of Psalm 22. He knows it better than anyone, right? In the end of Psalm 21, all the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. And all the families of the nations shall worship before you. And amazing that the cross itself is drawing people from every nation, and Jesus is fulfilling that very fact. But God, he changes our heart when we go to him and taking these grievances to him. You are right to acknowledge that God is in charge, but he's so much more than that. He knows the things we don't know. Psalm 6, 35, 42, 43, 44, all of these places. Job constantly does it. Jeremiah 12:1, Moses, Exodus 3:11, constantly we see the saints bringing their grievances before God. It's a good thing to do that. Pour out your heart. If you're not taking it in prayer, God knows your heart's grieved anyway. It just causes more pain not to take it to the Lord. God gives us two vital pieces of advice while we are waiting for him. It's chapter 2, verse 3. You'll see it here. It says, for still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. In other words, God will bring you sufficient answers. Okay? Whatever you're struggling with, however you're taking this grievance to God, this is hope that God is going to give us answers. Hebrews 10:37 picks this up, and he says, yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. In other words, I believe this is speaking of the return of Christ, which we are all patiently waiting for. And while the world is messed up, that is the ultimate solution to anything wrong in the world. The point is, God is not making a mistake in his delay. And he will come and resolve whatever struggles we have. And then verse 4, behold, his soul is puffed up. And he's speaking of the enemy, the prideful one, the one who worships his hands and his own accomplishments. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by faith. Now this verse is the foundation of the Reformation. Changed the entire church. Martin Luther came to this conclusion as he heard the Apostle Paul reiterate it in Romans chapter 1. But the righteous shall live by faith. Now this instruction for us is applied in the midst of us pouring our hearts out to God when we don't know why God's doing what he's doing. When we're not getting the answer to what we think God should be doing, this instruction comes into our way, and this instruction is a principle. It's a foundation. The righteous shall live by faith. In other words, if you want to live your life right in the midst of all the messes, how should you be living? By faith. Now, what is this not faith in? This is not faith in that God is going to do exactly what I think God should do. That's not what this is. And do you know how many flavors of Christianity include that false teaching in their teaching? That faith in God means that I believe God is going to do exactly what I think God should do. Do you understand the danger in that? Now, who is made in whose image? Right? Are we made in God's image, or is God made in our image? Do we tell God what to do and then he must do it? No, that's not how it works. He gives this instruction, righteous shall live by faith. If you're going to do one thing in all the world that you want to sum up as being the correct way to live, it's by faith in God. Now trusting God, believing in God, and it's knowing that God knows which way is best when I don't. That's what it is. We were at Harbor Freight the other day. I brought my daughter, and she said something to me like, "Are we going to go to church next?" And I said, "Yeah, we're going to church next after this." I make her do all these horrible errands. Who wants to go to Harbor Freight for a little 9-year-old girl? But the gentleman that worked there said, "Did I overhear you mention church?" And I said, yes, and he quotes our passage out of Timothy that is our main verse for Awana, a workman never ashamed, and he quotes that, and I said, yeah, that's Daddy's job, and he's like, oh, you're a pastor, and he looked at my daughter, and he said, do you know any verses? And she shared John 3:16, and he said, that's right, and he said, don't ever forget, the most important thing is your faith. Everything else is secondary. The most important thing is your faith. And it's true. But it's not faith in whatever you want it to be, right? That's the problem. It's the faith in the real God, the true God, who he really is, who his character is, that he will take us wherever he wants to take us, and our faith says that's okay, that's what I signed up for. Okay, that's what faith is. Are you entrusting yourself to God to take you on whatever journey he wants to take you, no matter where it is? Or would you rather trust in your own hands and make God in the image of your own hands? God, I think you should do this. Go back to high school. Imagine all those people you prayed that God would let you date, right? And imagine if all that worked out. You only get one, so it all couldn't have worked out, but imagine if that did work out. Some of the people you'd be like, man, I never want to be with that person. Maybe some of you are like, oh, I wish it would have worked. No, we won't go there. But if God gave you everything you asked for, we'd be a mess. And who would be teaching whom? We wouldn't be learning anything. We'd be an absolute nightmare of his creation. When you don't understand what God is doing, or you don't like what God is doing, your responsibility is to believe in God, trust God no matter what, Be faithful to God. They're all the same thing. Be faithful to God. Isaiah 55, 8 through 9, we need to be reminded of this every day. If you're going to memorize a verse, a reminder on the back of your bulletins, a place for notes. It would be good to write some of these verses down, reiterate them, write down these principles, go through them throughout the week. For my thoughts are not your thoughts. That's all we need to know, right? Neither are your ways my ways. Do you understand the order of that? You don't tell me what to do, people. You don't give me a honey-do list for your life. God, I love you, and I have a plan that I want you to do in my life, okay? It's not what it's about. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And you know what happens after a life of faith? As the heavens are above the earth, that's how much his ways are above ours, but our ways become more like his as time goes on. We'll never be to the fullest extent, but the point is we adjust to him. He doesn't adjust to us. God doesn't adjust himself to us. We are constantly being changed to become more like him. Isn't that awesome? So I know we want to cry out to God. We want to plead our case, and that's okay. That's what Habakkuk did, or Habakkuk, or whatever you call him. That's what he did. He pleaded his case, and he watched. And God filled in the details. He is the standard of all that is right. That is why he is worthy of our trust. Am I right? Everybody can say amen to that. God contrasts the one who lives by faith to the Babylonians. The Babylonians are marked by wine. They really liked their wine and gave quite an attention to wine. They were marked by arrogance, greed. The nation collects people from other nations. I used to collect baseball cards. The Babylonians collect people. That's how messed up they are. Habakkuk pronounces an oracle of woe against the Babylonians in verse 6 through 17 as God clearly sees the evil going on with them. So here is the answer. Habakkuk, you're right. The Babylonians are more evil than the Judites and the southern kingdom. And I'm going to use them as a tool to punish Judah for what they deserve, but then I'm not done. That more evil nation is going to get punished. And here is the woes against them. I'll spare that for you. You could do that in your personal devotions this week. The woes against the Babylonians in verses 6 through 17. Habakkuk then calls out the idolater in chapter 2, verse 18 and 19. And the distinguishing marks of an idolater. The idolater follows lies. The idolater trusts his own creation, and he's like making fun of him. God's making fun of him. They make these little trinkets out of wood and metal, and they think they're their God. And Habakkuk is giving this ridiculous description of these people. They trust their own creation. Imagine after church today, you go in the backyard and you take a log and you melt some metal and put it around the log, and you start looking to that as your God. No, thank you. But guess what? That's exactly what we do when we give God a specific plan and say he must do that plan in our life. And when we hold God to our plans and not let God adjust us. You understand that? The danger in that is we're fashioning our own plan and putting it before God of how we think it should be. I'll be honest with you. I've done that many times. It's part of life. It's really part of discipleship, letting God adjust that. You know the hardest thing in ministry ever for me? I've shared this with many of you. The hardest thing I've ever dealt with in ministry is praying for the parking lot next door. You know, there's people in the denomination that still ask me if we got that parking lot next door. There were people praying everywhere. People actually donated money. A lady sent a $1,000 check anonymously. I don't know who it was. Maybe it was one of you to pay for this parking lot. And, God had another path. I met with leaders in the denomination, and they said, oh, that'll never sell. It's overpriced. Sold a week later after they said that. The denomination understood it was important to us, but they didn't see it as something that somebody would want to buy. And our future at this location at a certain number depends on parking spaces next to the church. And I'm sounding pretty convincing, aren't I? How God really should have gave us that parking lot. And I'm out there, and the guy bought the parking lot, and he's measuring. I'm like, what are you measuring? Our new building. Oh, it's going to be that big? Yeah, 170 feet. Oh, we won't even see the mountain anymore. Great, that's wonderful. And we won't be able to park there. That's hard. I dealt with it. Did I pray? Yes. I didn't take out a mortgage because we already have enough mortgage, and I didn't think that's the way the Lord was leading at the time. What is God's plan there? I have no idea. Do I stop following him because he didn't do what I thought he should do? Absolutely not. In other words, it's an opportunity for God to adjust my plan to his plan, right? He's sovereign. He's loving. It's his church. Who cares about the church more than God? So in the midst of this, these trinket worshipers, they follow something speechless. How about that log you make in your backyard with metal? Is it talking to you? He talks to a wooden or stone thing. That's ridiculous. That's what an idol worshiper does. And his fake God can't teach him. And I find that amazing because there's an important relationship with us and God that involves him teaching us, right? Teaching is an essential component to our relationship with God. It really is summing up what discipleship is. Contrast that with the true God, but, that's a contrast, the Lord is in his holy temple in verse 20. Let all the earth keep silent before him. Now, notice how interesting this is. He's in his holy temple. It's unapproachable, incomparable. It's not a trinket you fashion. It's somebody who is utterly different and utterly greater than all the creation. But notice this. Let the earth keep silent before him. Who's the one that's silent? Not the one we worship, like the little trinket that you made in your backyard with wood. And nobody do that today, please, or I'll feel really horrible. That thing doesn't talk back to you. But when it comes to God, the ones who deal with God are the ones who are silent. He's the one who teaches and talks. And when you feel like your life is being ripped apart and God's not hearing you and things aren't the way they should be or the way you think they should be reminded that God is the one that teaches us. God is the one that adjusts us. God is worthy to trust. He's always good. He always does only but good in your life. And God will always take care of you to what is the greatest good, determined by the one who can only determine what the greatest good is. Habakkuk's prayer, he prays for mercy and he recounts all that God has done to the enemies in the past. And this is also very good. Just like the psalmist, he doesn't understand God's ways, but he comes to the place where he prays before God. God adjusts him, and he is iterating out all the things God has done. When we don't know what God is doing in the present, his past work, both in our lives and throughout history, including the Bible, gives us the confidence to trust him now. Did you ever counsel yourself in the midst of a disaster and say, well, God took me through that disaster and that disaster and that disaster and that disaster. I'm here breathing now. There's a good chance he's going to take me through whatever I'm going through now, right? That's what faith is. God has already earned our trust to go through what we're going through now. He's earned it. Now, we come to faith in Jesus Christ for salvation. We believe in Jesus. We accept him. We trust that Jesus died on the cross for our sin, was buried in the grave, rose from the dead, and we trust that that brings us eternal life, but we need to trust him every step of the way. Trust him. This is not easy time for Habakkuk. He says, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. I love this. You know why? It's saying that when we go through stuff, it's not easy, and it's okay if it's not easy. He's not saying, skip the emotions. Why are you sad? Don't you trust God? Remind them. Habakkuk, whatever his name was, he was trembling in the midst of waiting for God. So I'm here, and it's okay to cry, right? It's okay to get comfort from others who have gone through it. That's part of the process. That's part of being human, right? But in the midst of this, he's still waiting. and whatever you want God to do isn't happening right now, if there's something you really want God to do and he's not doing it, are you still going to trust him regardless? Do we trust God regardless of whether he does exactly what we think he should do? That's what should separate us from being true followers of Christ. Verse 17, though the fig tree, there needs to be more songs about Habakkuk. Maybe because people can't pronounce his name. This is such a beautiful depiction of a song. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the field yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herds in the stall. In other words, if everything in life that we hold of value is messed up, right? These are valuable things for somebody in the southern kingdom of Israel, in Judah. He says, no matter what, I will rejoice in the Lord. And even better, I will take joy in the God of my salvation. So what I would venture to say is, if you had two choices, that God does exactly what I say he should do at all times, or connecting with God, which one's going to bring you more joy? The latter. Connecting with God brings us joy. Our relationship with God brings us joy. And that is awesome. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. Now, men, we don't like to say we like to prance around. That's a little bit weird in our culture, and that's what the deer does. But you know, you as a little kid, you're so excited. Like, when my kids have something coming up, they're running around the house, Grandma's coming. I don't know why that's exciting, but they're running around the house excited, and we're going to go do something. We're going on vacation. They can't sleep. Why? Because there's joy. This is adults. Habakkuk, he's having joy despite his legs are trembling in fear, and now he's joyful, and he's jumping around because God has trained him back to God. God has steered him right back to the character of God, to the right place. And then you see those words, to the choir master. Wait a second. Why is the choir master here? What is he doing here? Jason, why are you here? We're going to be singing about this. It's so good. We're going to write songs about this. This is like a psalm. It's a prophet and it's a psalm, a prophecy and a psalm. And we should be singing about this. God is my joy. He will adjust my life to him. I don't adjust God to me. Application today is, it's easy. Trust, obey, be faithful towards God. Draw near to him, and in that connection, allow him to supplant your life with joy. It's okay to be joyful, okay? I won't be like, why are you smiling? You're in church. No, we all should be joyful. We should be singing so loud it wakes up every neighbor on Lincoln Avenue on a Sunday morning who's sleeping in, because we have so much to rejoice in the God's character. So in that connection, allow him to supplant your life with joy, but we are also commanded to rejoice in him and be joyful. It's a command and it's a result. God's joy surpasses and is powerful to prevail through any circumstance. Remind yourself of his work in the past to get you through the present. So it's a lot there. It really comes down to remember to trust him. Remember to be faithful to him because he's trustable. Remember to let him adjust you to his plan, no matter what that is. But take your grievances to him and let him fill your life with joy. Let's pray.